Mexico. The funeral customs from Mexico is a culture that Mexicans used to celebrate their dead. They also had a day in November, which is called the Day of the Dead. I will discuss this further in details as we go on with the presentation. Next slide. Introduction. We will be discussing different areas in the customs of funerals of Mexicans. We're going to discuss the history of Mexican funerals, what happens at a Mexican funeral, the funeral and wake, the bereavement and memory of the deceased, and also the Day of the Dead. Next slide. History of Mexican funerals. The Day of the Dead was inspired by the Aztecs. That was in the 16th century. The Spanish adopted their ways because they liked it, the way they honored the dead. The Mexicans introduced this to the Americans within museums, libraries, schools, universities, and parks. They also celebrate their cultural heritage. They also show the Americans how they celebrated their culture and heritage. Being that the Americans did not like the Latinos and their ancestors, this made it hard for them to share their customs with the Americans. Second, mostly, when they were able to show the Americans how to celebrate the deceased, this let them know that the dead should be honored and not mourned. Next slide. The things that happen at a Mexican funeral. So this is what happens at a Mexican funeral. The Mexican death ceremonies and funeral customs are not like ours. They have different old rituals and numerous point of views. The customs are mourning must be spent with the body before the dead. They also spend 48 hours with the deceased with friends and family instead of a quick burial like most Americans and other cultures do. The body is kept in the house and laid on a table, wrapped in a sheet or some kind of cloth. Next slide. The funeral and wake is different than what Americans have. They consist of Christian mass, grave sites, and usually there's a tradition for this. The families prefer a burial site that is easy to access so that they celebrate important days like birthdays, the Day of the Dead, and their anniversary. The family and friends leave important memorabilia of the deceased at the burial site. Things such as pictures, cards that was important, playing cards that were important to the deceased, their favorite shirt, anything that was memorable for the deceased. Now, there are numerous people that visit to remain overnight, sitting around and talking about old times, participating in prayer. Next slide. The bereavement of the dead and the memorial of the dead. There are grieving customs. This occurs during the main days and months after the passing. The families will usually request God for their loved one for 9 days. This means that they will pray for 9 days for their deceased loved one. The family also proceed in prayer and check the deceased rosary at least once a month. After a year, the family also check the rosary individuals once every year. And if they're Catholic, they say they go to mass for the deceased on the 3rd, 7th, and 13th day of their passing. So these customs of their bereavement and memory are very important to the Mexicans. They do a lot of making sure the deceased rosary is always available, because the rosary is a Catholic item that is very special and important to the Mexicans, because they are very into their Catholic religion. Next slide. Now, I will talk about the Day of the Dead. The Day of the Dead is committed to deceased, not just one family deceased, like a lot of families that had loved ones passed away. This is the night, there is things that happen the night before the Day of the Dead. On the night before, the families all through Mexico congregate, and they play music, sing, and share stories that happen with their loved ones. So within all of Mexico, they don't just have bereavements and memories of just one person passing away. They have several different families that conduct this Day of the Dead. Families set up the graveyard for customary candlelight held the night before November 2nd. So what they do is they put candles out in the grave, they sit in the graveyard, and they make sure that everybody is praying and they are celebrating the dead without mourning. So the Day of the Dead is held on November 2nd. That is a very important day for the Mexicans, November 2nd. They also decorate the gravestones and graves, which are over the ground, concrete structures, and reprinted in splendid, inviting tones. They use loud tones, and some people get dressed with makeup. They make different kinds of floats. It is a very outstanding celebration that the Mexican has. It's very interesting. As I was conducting my research, I learned a lot of different things and saw a lot of different costumes and stuff that they wore. They also use blossoms and wooden crosses engraved with the prayers are also part of the setup. So they put the Catholic prayer on the cross, and they also put different kind of flowers, which brings a good scent to the graveyard. And they also have dinners and drink wine and celebrate the dead. Next slide. Are there any questions that you have for me about funeral customs of Mexico? This ends my presentation. Thank you.